Hello everyone, welcome back to Julian's Discussions. This is Zachary Julian, and today we're going to be talking about terminology you need to know when it comes to elections. Specifically, this is going to be about what you are going to hear on ABC, MSNBC, Fox News, wherever you get your predictions for elections. First up, we have your really simple red state, blue state terms. Shown is a map of the states that have voted consistently with one party or another in presidential elections since 2000. There have been, I believe, 6 presidential elections since 2000, including 2000. And these are the states that have voted with one party or another every time. Reasonably, all of these states could be considered a red state or a blue state under that definition. However, normally you're going to see states like Washington or in California, New York. Those are your more solid blue states. Illinois can be in that group. So can much of New England. But just because they consistently vote with one party does not mean that they're a red state or a blue state. Take a look at Minnesota. They haven't voted Republican in decades. However, they are still considered they are not really considered a blue state. They fall into the next group I will mention, purple battleground contested states. And Texas, while it was a red state for a long time, it is now really beginning to go to that purple region. And Florida is kind of working its way opposite of that, from being a very contested state to being a sturdier Republican state. We'll have to see if that continues. Next up, that seems weird here, is Colorado. That is a state that is more working towards being very blue state, but it did not meet the criteria I used on this map, which is not really an official criteria of any sort. Different networks will use different terms to define these things. And moving on to the next set of states, these are your swing purple battleground states. Normally you're going to see swing and battleground used more so to define polling, as where the polls can be one way or another. Purple is more of where your voters are at. However, these all mean the same thing. These are where your competitive states are going to be, your competitive races. And this includes your blue wall states that the Democrats really try to focus on every election: Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. These are very important states for the Democrats to hold. Without them, they often don't have the votes to win anything. But I also have Texas, North Carolina, and Florida on here. These are all states that are more so in the transitional phase. As you can see, I don't have Colorado on here. But again, this is just my personal opinion of what states can be competitive depending on the year. Nevada can be competitive, Colorado can be competitive, Ohio, maybe with the right candidates, could be competitive. New Hampshire can be very competitive. Just look at the Senate races there sometimes. It's very possible that a state like Missouri has been competitive before and could very well be again. Like, this is a very fluid map. These change from one election cycle to the next, oftentimes very quickly. Like Georgia and Arizona 10 years ago, you would never say would be a competitive state to electing Democratic senators just last year. Now, that brings us to our next set of terms, which is all voting related. So when you go to the ballot box, when you're voting, you're either voting at the ballot box, in person, or earlier absentee. Now, earlier absentee voting, when it comes to the news network, is normally covered on election night because not every state counts them at the same time. Early and absentee voting varies largely by state. Some states it's no excuse. Some states you have to have a very valid excuse. And every state counts them differently too, which is why they're brought up so often. In some states they're counted first, other states they're counted side by side with normal votes, and in others, they're counted after all the regular votes are tallied, and really this varies by county too. So this leads to some very long election nights. 2020 was a perfect example of this. And then you have a registered voter. This is just someone who is allowed to vote. An active felon is really the largest disqualifier of active voters, and yet most voters in America are either not registered or simply do not vote even if they are registered. This is where a term like voter turnout could come in. Registered voting and voter turnout percentages are very important in America in determining who wins elections in different areas. However, that's not the focus of this video. Another term you hear a lot on the news is split ticket voting. Some years it's very common, other years it's very rare. But what a split ticket vote is, it's voting for both a Democrat candidate and a Republican candidate in the same election. So an example of this would be 2020. Let's go use the Georgia run for example. You have Senator Kelly Loeffler versus now Senator Raphael Warnock, and then John Ossoff versus David Perdue. Say you really did not like Kelly Loeffler and her ties to Donald Trump, and so you would vote for then now Senator Raphael Warnock. But you liked what David Perdue had done for the state, liked what he stood for, and vote for him in that race. So you now voted for one Democrat, one Republican. That is a split ticket vote. That has varied in popularity over the years. It used to be very common. Now it is not. Political polarization has played a very large part in this. And then we have, when you are watching an election predictions, you're going to often see these terms thrown around. Margins of victory, both predicted and past margins of victory. This is just percentage points won by. So say candidate A has 53% of the vote and candidate B has 44% of the vote. The margin of victory there is 9%, 9 points. You're normally just going to hear it as one of those two, 9 points or 9%, but 9 percentage points of victory. That is what it would mean, and yet no, those numbers do not add up to 100. I know I said 3% of the votes went to a third-party candidate, such as the Libertarian Party or the Green Party. Now, I suppose a third party is just simply any party that is not the Democrats or Republicans. Now, from this, you are able to then go into what the margins are and what the terms related to them are. So you have tilt. This is your smallest margin. These are easily changed from year to year. This is where a lot of your purple states lie. This is less than 1%. Wisconsin, I believe, was won by less than 1%, both 2016 and 2020. I think Georgia was decided by less than 1%, at least in the runoff elections. Then lean margin, that's a 1 to 5% in most places. So these are your races that are getting safer, but they could still change, and they oftentimes do change from year to year. Then a likely margin is a 5 to 10%. These are normally pretty safe. These aren't the most competitive races, but these are still ones that to watch in a really big wave year like 2010 and the Tea Party wave that happened with the Republicans winning a disproportionate amount of seats, even with it being a midterm year. A lot of likely races that didn't actually result in the Democrats winning. Then you have your solid races, and these are normally 10 points or more of a predicted margin of victory. And a lot of the times, these are in your safer states. California, Utah, New York. A lot of times they have predicted margins of victory in this range. Now, this doesn't mean that a candidate predicted to win won't ever lose. It has happened. It happens somewhat often. However, these are the ones that are not really paid close attention to during the electoral cycle. And another term that you'll hear to describe this is the tilt and lean as very competitive, likely as mildly competitive or somewhat competitive, and solid as not very competitive. And another term I would want to define here is that Tea Party wave I discussed earlier. That was simply in 2010, the midterm elections. The Republicans won a very disproportionate amount of seats compared to what would be predicted, and this resulted in them having lots of control over electoral districts that have helped them keep that edge in the past decade. And I think that wave is probably one of the most significant events in American history. Anyways, that's all the terms I got for you today. If you like this content and want more of it, I'll probably be doing one on polling specifically, and then also quite possibly one on candidates and candidate spending and campaigning in general. So if you'd like to see that, hit that like button, subscribe. Have a rest of your day, and hope you watch again. Bye.